Welcome back to Light Talk, where everyday people can share their own unique spiritual journey stories. If you have a story and would like to share it, email me at lighttalk423 at gmail.com. And while you're at it, click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons down below. We today have a very special second timer guest today. Woohoo! Welcome back, Michael. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for a recap, and then we'll start up on our stories.
Thank you, and thank you for having me back. Short recap, let's see. Grew up in metaphysics and free of the dogma, and started paranormal investigating in 2018. And in 2020, let's see, it's 24. So 2022, I started podcasting. So that is my journey in as short a nutshell as I can make it.
Sounds good enough. All right. Yeah, I'm excited to hear your stories. You have some really cool stories that I know is just going to blow our minds. So let's get started.
All right. So I think where we left off on the last one, I had mentioned missing time. And so what that would look like is I would get in the car and like my friend's house is 45 minutes away. I would start the car, I would start driving towards the highway, and next thing I know, I'm pulling up into her parking lot and no idea how I got there, which route I took. And so it's kind of an eerie feeling of, oh my gosh, what happened? And a feeling of, thank God I didn't get in an accident. As far as I know, the car looks okay. And so thankfully nobody was hurt. And I started making the joke of, whoever's driving the car for me, thank you for being a good driver. Please let's not have this happen again.
Yeah, I've had the same thing. I always thought I was sleeping behind the wheel. So that was just scary in itself for me because it's like I still am fearful of sleeping behind the wheel. It's like,
Right. And I mean, there's a difference of missing time where, you driving down, I'll say a highway that's got nothing but open land and occasional street lights and they'll light up the highway at night. And that gets hypnotic and you kind of feel in a trance. And before you know it, it's like, oh, I'm like 3 cities from where I thought I was. Okay. And so that's a little different feeling because there you're just kind of the road, becoming one with the road, and you're just so focused on the road that it's like you miss everything around you versus
mhm.
not even knowing what road you were on and how you got from A to B. That's what missing time is there's no hypnotic like, oh yeah, explanation of why all of a sudden you're like aware and things are different and you're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
3 cities ahead of where I thought I was. Making
Yeah.
great time.
Yeah. I had the one where I left my house. I remember locking the door. I don't remember turning around, walking to my car, getting in my car, driving 30 minutes, 45-minute drive with multiple turns and go parking at work, walking into the building, punching in our morning meeting. I don't remember any of that. I just remember the next thing I
Well,
remember is talking to the guys at work.
well, hopefully there wasn't anything important in the meeting.
I know.
But oh, an interesting thing is there are times when driving, you know how you all suddenly you'll get a feeling of what's going on with, you're like, I almost want to say like a spidey sense or something that you're like, all of a sudden you're like, something's different. Something is trying to get my attention, but it's not a phone call. It's not, a pager or anything like those times. It was like you were just getting a sense of something is there that's different. And I had that happen on 4 occasions. And on those 4 occasions, I happened to look up. And usually for me, this happens at nighttime or twilight. And sure enough, there would be something in the sky just hovering there. And I would see it. And if I was driving, I would take some turns and I'd look up and it's still in the same spot. And I would stop the car. It's still there. And for those who are sitting there saying, well, it's probably a spot on the windshield, I got out of the car and it was still there. So sorry, folks, it's not a spot on the windshield, but something was staying with me. And once I saw it and was like, they realized I seen them, then they would, like, I would drive and then they would just simply disappear. It was like they needed me to know they were there.
So this was like a spirit that was there. It wasn't like a craft or anything. It was
No, I think it was a craft. I think it
okay.
was spiritual beings that were on crafts that were or star beings that were letting me know that they were around. And I feel like sometimes when that happens too, is normally my reaction is to slow down and go a different way or alter something on the path that I'm on. And so I feel like it's there protecting me from something that was might have been on the original route. And so they're like, yeah, let's show ourselves. He'll either slow down or divert and
Yeah.
therefore avoid what's going on.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I love those angels.
Oh yeah,
They're pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
they are. And I, for those watching, you had mentioned that you were interested in my paranormal background. And so I did start solo in 2018. I think it was 2019 is when I started actually investigating with teams where I would say I was a paranormal investigator. And to date, I have been on, I would say around 100 to 120 investigations in this short window.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, I've seen quite a lot of things. And the interesting thing that people will probably find interesting is when I first started my first year of paranormal investigating, well, maybe my first year to a year and a half, I looked at it as if this was my career. So I would treated it with the respect of corporate world of we're serious on the investigation, we're
Hmm.
documenting, we're going through the motions, and I was getting virtually nothing. It's like I
Really?
may get occasionally something in a photo, but I was getting no EVPs, no really any activity. And I was like, I'd feel things around, but I couldn't document them or interact. And so, ironically, I was like, started wondering, what's going on. And I was watching Haunted Live with the Tennessee Ray Chasers. And they go, and there's a guy hiding in the shower. and a new teammate walks in and they scare them and they all start laughing and cutting up, and then they're like, all right, let's keep going, and did all that. And my mind goes, wait a minute, they're professionals. They're goofing around and having fun. Why can't I do that? And so I started slowly integrating some more fun and letting loose and letting go of the professional, like straight-laced business type atmosphere. And as I was letting things go, I started to get EVPs. I started to get more orbs and pictures. I started to get see apparitions. And so the activity ramped up the more fun I was having. So that to me was like an eye opener to where when people say, you gotta have fun. I was like, that's actually true. They love the fun energy and it kind of ramps them up. And when you think about it, what energy is like the highest energy out there is love and happiness.
Yeah.
So if we're going to
Yeah.
feed them energy, and I'm not saying I feed them my energy, I'm just saying the emotional energy that you let out helps. And so if you're going in and you're upset, you're going to find a spirit who attracts to the energy of anger, upsetness. We call those negative entities. And if you're going in there with light, love, happiness, joy, you're going to attract spirits of the light energy, positive side. And so that's something I started to learn while doing paranormal investigating and podcasting was how your emotions are affects the investigation. And that's why when you hear some paranormal investigators are like, yeah, I was slated to go to this location, but I wasn't in the right mindset, so we had to postpone it. And everyone's like, well, why did you postpone? Well, everybody was set up and geared up, and this could be last minute.
Yeah.
And that's not right to do to everybody. But in the paranormal field, that absolutely is the right thing to do. You never
Right.
want to go into an investigation not 100% because it will affect a lot of things.
And that's with all areas of the this realm of the 5D and all. I mean, with me reading cards and everything, it's the same kind of thing. You got to bring in that upper energy to bring in the higher energy to get a good reading.
Right. And one
Mhm.
thing that's interesting too is spirits react to the intentions of those who enter. And so I started noticing two trends of people who were there who were genuinely wanting to make connection would have lots of experiences of either hearing a spirit, seeing a spirit, but having interactions like mediums, their gifts just off the chart. Whereas when you have someone who's like, oh, I'm just in this to say I was here and I'm like trying to get famous and trying, all these different reasons, they'll be like, well, nothing happened here tonight, so I guess we'll just move on. And it's like, well, yeah, because I take the opinion spirit knows who genuinely wants to connect and who doesn't. And so they're going to pick and choose just like we would who
Mm-hmm.
they want to
Yep.
interact with. And so
Yep.
that's
Yep.
why I feel like locations can be dead some nights, so to speak, and very lively other nights is they're looking at who's there and going, yes, we want to party with these people or
Yeah.
You guys are nuts. We're staying away from you.
And that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, it's like you going to a party and you're going to hang out with people that are going to make you laugh versus someone that's having a rough day or whatever and is just kind of like down in the dumps or what. So you're going to go to those ones that are happy because this is a party.
Right. And the thing that I found interesting was one story was kind of it was funny, but it stressed me out to no end. Was we had a just opened this area up and cleaned it out, and we were investigating it that night, and it was a guest investigator. And so she's going through her process, and I'm sitting and something says to look up, and I see this white coat start running towards the door. And I'm like, oh man, someone's about to enter the room, and that's going to cause a disturbance. I'm not by the door. I can't get to the door without scooting over some people, and I don't want to interrupt what's going on. And so I'm like panicking in my mind, going, oh my God, how do I stop this person from interrupting this and doing all
Right.
of this? And I mean, meanwhile, I'm sure everybody in there is like, I could care less. But I'm like, no, I want this guest to have the best experience here. And they never come to the door. And I'm like, okay, thank God they didn't come to the door. And then I realized looking up again, I realized the windows are blocked. I couldn't see outside. So whatever was running by was already in the
In.
room with us.
Yeah.
And so I realized this, and just as I realized this, the guest finishes what she's doing and says, so, does anybody have anything they'd want to share? And I kind of look down for half a second and then I look up and I go, well, while you were doing your thing, a white coat could have been a lady was running by and I thought she was going to come in and realized she was already in. And she goes, why didn't you say anything? I said, I didn't
Oh.
want to interrupt what you were doing and interrupt your, process. She goes, next time, interrupt.
Oh man.
So, yeah, so that was a fun
Oh.
experience of, I mean, she understood where I was coming from and how that was stressing me out, and she just was like, you know what? It's okay. But in future now, if we're ever on investigation together, interrupt me. You have permission to interrupt me
Nice.
for that stuff going on. And I'm like, thank you. Because, it's like it you want to be polite and respectful and everything, and you don't know how someone's going to react to, being interrupted,
Right.
even though it's like this is where you're supposed to. It's like you're still like, we're setting up energy. I don't want to interfere with that.
Yeah.
But
Maybe because of the situation, because this stuff can happen so quickly, you kind of have to say something right then and there.
I know, and everybody was like like almost jumped when I said they were in the room and they were running right behind the chairs, and everyone that was sitting in the chairs was like wanting to jump up and look, and I was like, they're already gone. Sorry, people, you missed it.
You
And I
missed
was
it.
like, this was the first time too for me that I actually could make out detail of like it being like a white lab coat,
Oh,
which makes
wow.
sense because we were in a crematorium attached to a hospital that was run by the church.
Hmm.
And so
Makes sense.
it was like, wow, it's like, yeah, I'll always remember that. And I mean, it's funny the moments that we remember that stick with us, and whether it's the first time or it's the story behind it that kind of gets you to the story. And one uh one story I have that I don't share too often, but I'll share with you, was I was on a paranormal road trip, and I was with a friend from Holland that I met on Facebook in a paranormal group. And we had talked on Skype and became friends and trusted each other. So we were on this road trip, and I was in West Virginia, and we were going to a school that was abandoned and apparently had some history. Well, we get there and we're like, this is an interesting looking school because it's built on the side of a hill. So it's like one
Oh,
side
wow.
looks longer than the other because the ground is slanted. So we're walking up and we go inside and we're like, well, let's do our own thing and we'll do what we're doing. And all of a suddenly, I step away and I go into this classroom and I'm documenting, taking pictures of the walls and everything. So if something is different, I can go back and look for frame of reference and go, here's the original photo. Here's this. This isn't supposed to be here. Why is this here?
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is I step into this closet, and all of a sudden there's this pressure on my shoulders, like somebody has put hands on to push me through the floor. And it's like I finally go and say to the spirits, I'm like, look, I'm solid. I'm not going through the floor. I'm sorry. Not gonna happen. And so and I'm feeling uncomfortable, so I'm gonna go walk into the hallway and take a break. So I go out, and just as I do, my friend who's wearing a ball cap like this is going like this and pulling it down. And I said, what happened? He goes, a spirit just flicked it up. And I was like, you mean you get a hat flick and I get tried to be pushed through the floor? This hardly seems fair. But we're like, okay. And we kind of were like, all right. So he goes, well, we're going to go check out over here. I said, well, I'll continue my deal and I'll go into this room. And take one step over, and he took a step the other way. And we both stopped, turned, and looked at each other because we heard this girl. And I had to apologize. I forgot to close out Facebook. So that's what's dinging as notifications.
You're fine.
But, but, so we hear this giggle, and we stand and we're looking at each other, and we start to turn our heads and we turn and look at each other again because we hear a voice and this girl calling out a name. And he looks at me and he's got this look of like, you heard what I heard. And I'm looking at him and I shake my head like, yeah, I heard it. Well, we hear the laughter again, and we both go running up the stairs and I will actually go out into the balcony area that's overlooking this auditorium. And I go halfway there on some specific row, and I don't know why I'm there at the time. And I'm looking, and I'm like, who's here? Who's here? Where are you at? What's going on? What can we help you with? And getting nothing. Well, I look down and there's this weird mark on the floor, and I'm like, well, let me take a couple photos of this with my digital camera. because it's just so unusual. I want to see, what does this wax mark mean? And my friend's not coming out onto the balcony, and I look at him and I'm like, "You coming?" He goes, "Nope, I'm good where I'm at." And so he goes and turns around and starts to walk away, and I leave and go, and we're doing our own things, and we meet up in this one area, and they said, "Oh, you guys should go check out the top floor. There's this one area we really are interested in your opinion." And I was like, "Okay." So we go up on the top floor, and there's this classroom with this weird, like, kind of, you'd want to call it a closet, but it's too small to really be a classroom closet. It would be more
Hmm.
like isolation type of room, which I don't understand why is in this classroom, but it's got three windows. And when you step into this room, so before I get there, let me preface by saying there have been zero insects thus far throughout the investigation. Like nothing bothering us. We're not having anything around us. We step into this room, every window is coated with flies that are alive. They're all like sitting
Live?
on the window, yeah, moving around, but they're all
Hmm.
stuck to the glass. And there's like something out of like a horror movie kind of feeling. And the energy is so thick in there, it's like you can't stay in there very long at all. And we step out and they go, "Well, this is where somebody jumped and committed suicide." And we're like, "That makes sense."
Oh, okay.
So then we finish what we're doing, and this is the part of the story that's really funny is I meet back up with my friend and we decide to head out, and he goes to the car and he puts his hands like this and his head on the top of the car, and he goes, "I have to thank you." And I go, "For what?" He goes, "You didn't run out. You actually stayed like you said you would. So thank you for that. You didn't, run, and, like, you were honest and authentic of how you'd react. And it wasn't embarrassing kind of conversation,
Yeah.
feeling going on." And I was like, "Yeah, it was so cool." And to hear that, I mean, it was like, I mean, how else could you explain, hearing laughter when there's nobody there, just a guy and us, so there's no little kids and everything. And so we get back to the room, and remember those photos that I talked about taking?
Uh-huh.
The two on the balcony never came out. They were too fuzzy to come out. It was like
Yep.
something moved the camera, and it was like you couldn't make out anything. And I was like, "How is this possible?" Because I literally saw the image crystal clear when I hit the snap twice. And so we chalked it up to whatever that mark was, it wasn't meant to be seen. So
Yeah.
I was like, "All right." But
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. I I think we have enough time here. With the voices and everything, it's kind of funny because just a few weeks ago, my husband and I went on a walk, and I heard this female voice saying hello, and my husband heard it too, very loud as and plain as could be, and nobody was around. And we were kind of the same way. Did you hear that? Did you, was that you? No. Yeah,
I have a
it's kind
couple
of
more
cool.
instances of voices phenomenon where it like upset me because of equipment failures,
Oh,
or I didn't have equipment on me when it happened. And one that I'll tell real quick because, yeah, what the time is.
Yeah.
Before we got to West Virginia, we had stopped off for an event in East Texas, and we were at the hotel, and we had a two-bedroom, and because we were going to get up and go. So we were like, don't waste the time going and knocking on a door. We'll just make it easier and more convenient. So he's laying down. I go into the restroom with my phone to talk to someone and, be less noisy and allow him to relax. And all of a sudden, I hear my name being called. And I go, all right, I'll be right out. So I finish what I'm doing. I open the door. He's sound asleep. So I'm like, that's really weird. So I go to sleep. The next morning, I wake up and he's like, hey, you're finally awake. I'm like, yeah, you ready to go? Yeah. And I said, by the way, what did you need me for last night? Because I heard my name. And when I opened the door, you were asleep. And he goes, what do you mean your name? I heard my name. And I said, I never called your
Ooh.
name.
Ooh.
And it was like years after I realized he's a guy, I'm a guy, and it was a female voice I heard. And so we were like, oh man, this is going to be an interesting, fun time, on this road trip because that was starting out part of the road trip. And the event we were in was in a really haunted city in Texas. And so it was like we were like half an hour from it. So we're like, oh yeah, they're already reaching out.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I heard real quick, like I heard my voice being called and I was in the basement. My husband was upstairs and I heard my name being called and I'm like, what? And they're like, Dana, like, are you down there? I'm like, what? What do you want? Heard it like three times. And the next morning I was like, yeah, like you. It was like, wait, that was a female's voice. I'm the only female in the house.
Or are
What's
you?
going on? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you. Thank you so much, Michael, for being on the show a second time. And I really enjoy talking with you. And uh, let's just keep in touch and, maybe have you on again. How's
I'd be
everyone
happy
feel
to.
towards that? Okay.
There's more stories to share.
Sounds great. Sounds great. All right. Well, we're going to end it right now. And so thank you again for being on the show. And if anybody out there in the audience has any stories that you would like to share with us, email me at lighttalk423@gmail.com. And while you're at it, click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And in the meantime, we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.